Welcome everyone, Costin here with a discussion about the most overpowered, broken legendary lords currently in the game in Immortal Empires. I'm sure there are going to be some changes being made by the time this comes out of beta, and I might have to revise all the lists that I'm currently doing. But currently there are some very broken legendary lords, and there's some fairly broken factions, and they do go hand in hand. If you tie a powerful faction with a very powerful legendary lord, you get incredible results. Now, let me be very clear from the very onset here, that just because you have a powerful faction and a powerful lord does not mean that you will have a steamroll campaign. In point of fact, you might have quite the opposite. You might be so powerful that even on legendary you're taking so much territory. What's the issue that comes from that? Well, the issue is that the entire world is going to declare war on you because of the strategic threat, the diplomatic negative that you do get. So being extremely powerful does have its consequences, but the lords on this list are the most powerful in the entire game as far as I see it. But what is power? That is a good question. What is power? Well, I think it comes down to a combination of having a strong faction, having good effects, and having a really good start position that you can take advantage of. It is the combination of all of these things. It doesn't matter if you have a very strong legendary lord, if their starting position is filled with a lot of enemies that are going to limit their growth. Now, some can overcome this, but there are certainly some factions that can't. An honorable mention that I would give here is with regards to the dwarves. Why the dwarves? Well, the dwarves do have a great deal of power. Or the dwarfs, sorry, do have a great deal of power. Specifically, each of the dwarf lords has access to really strong units in tier 1 with dwarf warriors and in tier 2 with quarrelers. And you will most certainly be able to recruit quarrelers very quickly. The real benefit of quarrelers as a ranged unit, and the ranged meta is still very strong. You might introduce some variety in your armies with melee units, but not as dwarves, because quarrelers are really good melee units that you can use to take settlements. So dwarves do have an incredible army. However, even though they have a good army, they have a good economy, the one thing that really prevents them from being extremely powerful as legendary lords, any of these, despite their late game potential, is their early game problems. Each of them does have a lot of enemies to deal with. Grim Grudgebearer is probably in the best position, really, but even he still has to deal with Skarsnik, though honestly Skarsnik is just going to be a road bump on his way to glory. But the problem for the dwarves is as follows. Growth. The growth that dwarves have is actually fairly low, so that prevents them, from my perspective, from being on this list. There's also issues with the grudge meter, but really the slow growth that dwarves do have is what prevents them from really taking a highlight on this list. At number 5, we have Taurox the Brass Bull. Of course, Taurox was going to be on this list. The reasons are fairly clear. Beastmen are an incredibly powerful faction when played by you. When the AI plays them, Beastmen are fodder. They're very easy to deal with. But that comes down to how the faction plays. However, in the hands of a player, Beastmen are unbeatable. And that's not something I think any other faction can say with certainty. Here's why they're unbeatable. The way the Beastmen work is that you don't have traditional settlements. All you have are these hearthstones. These hearthstones are put by your horde army. So you start with Taurox, you start with only one army, and you can't recruit another for a while. But you start with an army, it functions as a horde. It has all these buildings, you can construct more if you have the gold. Now, you don't have, or favor. You can't get favor unless you're fighting battles or through a couple of settlements. Specifically, like over here in Taurox, I've gotten a harbor that's going to generate me 100 income from it for the rest of the game. So if you capture harbors, then they're pretty damn useful to get a hold of, or some other structures, a couple of other structures, but I think it's really just ports, and maybe that's just an oversight. By the way, you have your hordes, then you have your hearthstones. The way hearthstones are erected is you take a settlement, and you establish Hearthstone. There is a limit to how many based on the Hearthstone shards. You can get more of these later on, but you only start with one, so you can only have one active Hearthstone at the time. And when you establish a Hearthstone, the area around it, the area in red, so to speak, over here, is where you can fight battles, be it settlement battles, raising the settlements, or field battles to increase the devastation. Now, once the devastation is over 10 or so, you can then conduct a ritual, and that ritual will prevent settlements that are already destroyed, or settlements that will get destroyed, from being rebuilt. And it will create a massive amount of chaos, undivided corruption. Now, you don't care about public order, you don't care about the traditional economy. You do gain money from fighting battles, sacking settlements, raising settlements rather, and you use that money to improve the horde buildings. Not that it really matters improving the horde buildings for a large portion of the game, and that's the reason I'll get into. So you have the devastation, and then once you complete the ritual, you turn that devastation level into Marks of Ruination. Now, Marks of Ruination have various levels, but what they really do is unlock the ability to recruit more units, army capacity, horde building construction, and more Hearthstone shards. The more you get, the better you are. So Beastmen are incredibly potent in the mid to late game, but they are a bit weaker in the early game. But they don't have a regular economy as anyone else. So if you want to recruit units, just let me go to my Wolf 1 armies. If you want to recruit units, you just go and you have global recruitment, or you have local recruitment, dependent on the structures that a Hearthstone or a camp has. So you can recruit units for free. There is, however, a limit to the vast majority of units, with the exception of a handful, with the exception of free, which is Chaos Warhounds, Ungor Raiders, and Ungor Spearmen Herds. Everything else has unit caps. You can increase the caps, but those caps are the limit, are the reason why Beastmen factions played by the AI are so incredibly weak, because the AI is not going to be able to increase those caps, because those caps are tied to something else called Dread. Now, Dread is increased through the rewards of Dread. You can increase unit caps, though you need to get a certain level with Marks of Ruination to be able to unlock certain units, like Jabbersaws, Cygors, and Gorgons do require a fairly high level. Then you get various upgrades like, oh, you want to get to Hearthstone rank free, you want to get more army capacity. You only start with the ability of only having one army. At level 2 of Mark of Ruination, you get an extra army. I am at level 3, so I have 2 extra armies. Those 2 armies are currently in Wolf 1. I've taken Tor and Lek from the Dark Elves. They didn't have an army there. It was fairly easy enough. I have 2 armies here, and the sole reason I haven't advanced with these armies is because I'm waiting for Taurox to arrive so I can get one of the challenges here to be able to get that 10% campaign movement range. The research tree does require you to do certain challenges, like, oh, have characters rank 15 or things like that, in order to really make it work to unlock upgrades. But research doesn't matter, economy doesn't matter, your settlements are fairly basic. The only thing you have in a settlement are the Hearthstones themselves, which have an incredibly powerful garrison, campaign movement range, etc., as well as certain buffing buildings that give you army buffs, faction buffs, or local province buffs, as well as increasing the garrison in their own way. Now, here's what makes the Beastmen in general incredibly powerful. Not the fact that they have free recruitment, not the fact that they don't have upkeep, not any of that. It's this. The Beastmen only have a handful of settlements. You'll only have a handful of Hearthstones. Like I have 4 over here by turn 22, but you only really have a certain number of Hearthstones. Now, Hearthstones have incredibly powerful garrisons, difficult ones. The kind of garrisons that it would take the AI, even on Legendary with very hard battle difficulty, it would take them, let's say, either a really powerful stack led by a Legendary Lord, or more likely 2 stacks or so. The AI currently in Immortal Empires is very rarely going to be able to do that, unless you're talking about Skaven, who can do that with Clan Rats and Skaven Slaves because they're very cheap. Or maybe Vampire counts with zombies or skeletons. So what that really means in practice you cannot be beaten. You can't even come close to being beaten, and you can recruit very cheap or free armies that are going to be able to really hold their own against a lot of low-level armies. That's from the start. Now, the issue is that they are cheap, low-level armies. This is the problem of the Beastmen, that in order to get really powerful armies, you do need to increase these caps, and it is pretty expensive. Dread is gained from battles or from certain structures, like, for instance, the heads on spikes, which gives you 20 per turn, can be increased all the way to 100 per turn. So you can get a good amount of dread, but you do need to fight battles. If there is any downside to the Beastmen, is that their low-level armies are relatively weak early on. And so you'll end up having to fight a lot of manual battles. But it doesn't necessarily matter. Unless you're attached to certain heroes or certain units like these Minotaurs, I would really hate to lose them because they're relatively high ranked. Like, if I lost this army, that would be fairly devastating, but I could recover from that. That's the point. And these armies here, I don't really care about because I could recruit them fairly quickly and get back into the game fairly quickly. And so the Beastmen end up being a tide of death that cannot be stopped. In particular, Taurox. So Taurox has two major benefits. He does have a benefit towards getting Minotaurs, which are some of the best units that you can recruit as the Beastmen. So he already has the benefit towards recruiting Beastmen, reducing their cap, so that is powerful. On top of that, he is probably the strongest legendary lord of all the Beastmen factions in terms of like combat prowess. And beyond that, he has a rampage meter. The rampage meter works like this. You fight battles, one after another, you increase it. Now, I haven't been able to do it, so it's fair to do it here because I've wiped out these factions and I'm moving him south to Wolf 1. And by the way, your goal is to get the long campaign victory. You need to raise or sack a large loot, raise or sack a large number of settlements. Though you can't really loot or sack them. The only thing you can do is actually just raise them. By the way, your goal is to why is this raise or conquer the following seven Oak of Ages? Okay, but why is that showing up twice? It doesn't matter. But your goal is to defeat the Empire in Bretonia, or rather Leon Kur. Okay, not too big of an issue right there, considering the problems they have, and defeat the Wood Elves. Anyway, Taurox, he works with Rampage. You fight battles, you increase it to different levels. Level 1, Level 2, Level 3. So you need to get a good amount of Rampage marks to increase this. But, and every time you increase this, you get to choose a reward. So at level 1, you can get something like Ward Save for all units, or Enemy Leadership -8. Pretty strong enemy melee defense. Okay, fairly strong choices there. At level 2, he gets more dreads, or income from raising settlements, or various other benefits. But the real kicker is this momentum cost to replenish campaign movement range. What is momentum? Ooh. Momentum is this. So you can replenish Taurox's campaign actions, campaign movement points, by using momentum. So you go on Rampage, you acquire momentum points. The more you get, the higher level you will be. But you can spend that momentum to also reset his campaign movement points. So that means that Taurox can go from battle to battle to battle without stopping. And he also gains points whenever he raises settlement, either a moderate amount or a small amount, dependent on your choice. The moderate amount is when you choose to go for less money, but you also get casualty replenishment on your army. And you can go from battle to battle to battle, raising settlements in his way, and not being able to be stopped, because the AI is not particularly buffed right now in Warhammer 3. And even when it was buffed in Warhammer 2, it didn't matter. Taurox was still a steamroller in that. So you have a faction where the legendary lord Taurox is a steamroller himself, but you also have a faction that can maintain a good number of armies for free, only limited by caps on good units, and you can have 2, 3, 6 stacks of troops that you can easily recruit very quickly without any problems whatsoever that you can just throw at the enemy. there is very little the AI can do to stop you. The only reason Taurox isn't ranked higher on this list is the fact that you do have a bit of a harsher start. You are going to be limited for a good amount of time, like I'm turn 22. The only real thing like I can recruit here are Ungar Raiders. Sure, I could have unlocked certain things, but this is the kicker, like I could have unlocked some of these units, but what I'm really saving for is the Minotaurs. Once you start getting the Minotaurs, Jabberslife, Cygors, and Gorgons, you are unstoppable. You make an army, you make a doom stack of those, nothing can stand in your way. No city, no army, nothing. And that is the real power. It's a ramp. It's a faction and lord that doesn't necessarily start in the strongest position, but ramps up incredibly well. And crucially, the way the AI works is the AI is not going to try and attack elements it thinks are well defended. So the vast majority of times they're not even going to bother your Hearthstones unless they have overwhelming advantages towards you. And what does it matter if I lose like this Hearthstone? What's the downside? I don't care. Sure, they'll be able to resettle this region. Big fucking deal. I just come back. I get more marks of ruination. Like if Nagaron, if Malekith, for instance, who declared war on me, if he takes down this Hearthstone, which would not be the easiest battle for him, if he takes it out, all he'll get is a bunch of ruined settlements with high Chaos Undivided Corruption that he has to resettle, rebuild from scratch, and I can always come back here, put another Hearthstone, beat the crap out of him, get more marks of ruination. The Beastmen cannot be stopped. Once the Beastmen get going, there is no way to stop them. It is that simple. There is also some bugs to be able to recruit an incredible amount of units by using the save mechanic. But even without exploits or cheeses or anything like that, Beastmen are just incredibly powerful. You will, however, have to fight a bunch of battles your own. But speaking about battles, another thing that gives the Beastmen an incredible advantage is that they have a fairly high ambush stance. So with Taurox, you do have an ambush stance, and you can get something like 70% ambush stance with him pretty early on. And that is a significant advantage because it means even if the enemy does have a powerful army, because you're ambushing them, you are going to have enormous advantages within that battle. So Taurox, the Brass Bull, number 5. And number 4, we have Eltharion, the Grim of the High Elves. In general, any of the legendary lords of the High Elves could have made the cut on this list. Eltharion, because of his fairly safe position in Ulthuan, same with Alariel, where they only really have to deal with Nakari and Count Noctilus, and neither of those are major threats. Alifa Nar, because he's also in a relatively safe position, though he's pretty close to the north, so he's gonna have Dark Elves of Harganeth and Malekith to deal with. Or Imric, who is here to the east, who has powerful dragons. But why Eltharion? Actually, why the High Elves? Well, the High Elves play as a fairly traditional Total War faction. They have structures, they generate income, increase public order. Their only special mechanics, so to speak, are having influence, which they can use for certain actions, like affecting public order, or not order, diplomatic relations between themselves and other factions, or other factions between other factions like Clan, Nagaron, Manfred, all that. So you can increase, decrease, and you can use influence for that. You can also use influence to recruit very powerful lords or heroes for your armies. Like for instance, if I recruited her, she would give me income from all buildings in a local region by 15%. So if I recruited her over here in this region, that's a 15% economic buff for a region that's already generating 1,400. It's going to generate a lot more once I finish this Oath Gold mine. Okay, so High Elves have a fairly strong economy, public order, etc. In fact, their public order is so good that their economic buildings gain more income if you have 100 control in a region. And it's very doable, even on Legendary, to achieve that by using the Promenade buildings. Okay, so that's the first thing. Their economy, the way their diplomacy works, all that, pretty good. Their armies as well, on all levels, are also fairly strong. At level 1, you basically are going to rely on archers and spearmen. Later on, archers with light armor, rangers, and then eventually dragons. You go all the way up to dragons. So their army on all tiers is fairly solid, fairly strong. Not necessarily the best ranged armor piercing in the world, but that is not necessarily going to be a problem for you. Get dragons, get swordsmen, get white lions. You have choices there to deal with any potential threat. They're really good against dealing with everything. Like, they've got pretty much everything that you could need in a faction. They don't have any particular weakness except ranged armor piercing on some of their units. And even then, with ranged armor piercing, the ranged armor piercing situation is only something that applies at the low tier, because then they get sisters, and Sisters of Avalon are really powerful ranged units. Even with the ranged unit nerf and the melee buff in Warhammer 3, Immortal Empires, Elves still have a fairly strong rosters, powerful heroes, powerful lords, powerful faction benefits. Okay, so why Eltharion? Why not Tyrion? I mean, Tyrion is a good choice, right? Emmerich, Tyrion, Alariel, they're all good choices. But, well, here's the thing about Eltharion. He isn't necessarily going to be the combatant on Tyrion's level. Like, Tyrion would beat the crap out of him in melee. So would Emmerich, I believe. But the benefit of Eltharion is what he brings as a legendary lord. So he doesn't necessarily have access to all that much until you start going into this dungeon of his. He is Batman. So what you do in this dungeon is you capture lords, legendary lords, normal lords, through battle, through a cage ability that you use. You use it when they're low HP, you use it, you capture them, you bring them here. You have several options. You can release them back, but they'll siphon certain percent, 5% of their faction's income, they'll siphon that back to you. And you can do this with a legendary lord, so understand that 5% of a faction's income is not something to sneeze at. You can interrogate them, though you do need an upgrade to be able to do that. You gain upgrades through Warden Supplies. Warden Supplies are gained by interrogating prisoners and disposing them. You can execute them for influence and experience as well. You can release them to their faction for siphoning and influence as well. And you can interrogate them to get various buffs to the unique units that Eltharion does have, the Mistwalker units. The Mistwalker units are special elven units that aren't necessarily the strongest, though they are fairly durable in their own right. Like, you need to recruit them for a special building, like the Mistwalker Sanctum, the Mistwalker Citadel. And this gives you options, like you can recruit. You have a couple of options here, 5 options. So you have the Spire Guard, the Faith Bearers, the Skyhawks, the Sentinels of Astari, and then finally the Knights of Torgaval, which they're not dragons, but God, dragons, they're powerful. These guys, they're not quite on that level, at least not on the level of the highest level of dragons. But dragons can be fairly expensive as well. Just bear that in mind. Even for the high elves, you may be able to afford a couple of units, but yeah, a couple of units of dragons. But the dragons are just gonna cost you a great deal when it comes to your army. But so will these guys, to be quite honest. But these guys do get benefits from various factions. Like if you interrogate the Greenskin Lord, you will get certain benefits to the Mistwalker units. If you interrogate Beastmen 1, all that. So you do get powerful units that only Eltharion has. That's his special catch. And you can get an economic benefit. You can get spies within a lot of the factions you're fighting. You can siphon off their income. You can get influence through that. He just ends up being, on the campaign side of things, significantly more powerful than anyone else. Now, here's the thing. He has all that power because unlike the safe legendary lords of the elves, he's gonna go to war against the world. He starts right off the coast over here of the Badlands, which is close enough to the Soundlands. Welcome to the Thunderdome of Total War Warhammer 3. There's a lot of factions, a lot of enemies, a lot of people won't necessarily like you. I started out fighting Warzag, Malagor, and I'm also still at war with Skarbrand. And I do have the Drakenhof Conclave. So you're going to be fighting a lot, but you have the tools necessary to be able to beat everyone in your path, become really powerful, establish a very strong foothold. And hell, your Eltharion region has an incredibly powerful economic base to go for if you capture it, but you do need to capture it. You do need to fight a lot of enemies. It is going to be a really fun time, but you do certainly have the power to do so. Or you can just abandon the Badlands plan and go for Tutor of Rest. As you start the campaign, you have a decision. You do start Tutor of Rest under your control and even an army outside of it. There is a Greenskin faction, a minor Greenskin factions to deal with. And you can hold on to Tutor of Rest for a good amount of influence, or you can abandon it for 25,000 gold as a start to build up this region here. 25,000 starting gold is an enormous amount, and assuming that your short campaign victory condition does work if Tyrion builds up Tutor of Rest to the level required, then it's certainly the good choice. But that's the thing about Eltharion. You can go for the Thunderdome approach, or you can disband this army and fight for Tutor of Rest, fight on Ulthuan, have a fairly safe campaign, expand in Bretonnia, or wherever you may wish. Deal with Grom the Paunch because he is your nemesis. You do have those choices when you are playing as Eltharion. You have a powerful army, powerful faction, powerful benefits from your lord, powerful units that you can gain significant benefits for this cage system. Influence, income, you name it. Eltharion, in my mind, is the strongest legendary lord by far of the elves. Though certainly Tyrion and Alariel, Lefanar, and Emmerich can hold their own. The elves are just a really strong faction in general, I'd argue. They have strong armies. They have, for the most part, a relatively safe starting position. They work in a very easily understood way. There's no complicated mechanics to worry about. There's no dread, for instance, to worry about with the elves. And the only secondary thing you have to worry about is influence, which is not really that hard to get the grasp of. They also have powerful rituals, rights to get more influence, control, various benefits. So yeah, the elves are just a very strong faction overall, and Eltharion is the best legendary lord for them. Though he does have probably the hardest start of all of them if you do decide to go for the Badlands and Southlands Thunderdome. And number 3 is going to be Helman Ghorst of the Caravan of Blue Roses, the Vampire Counts faction. The Vampire Counts are fairly strong in Warhammer 3. That's because although they don't have good growth, they do have ways of dealing with that fairly easily with the Channel Pit, and then Lichyard, and then Ossuary. So easy enough to get good growth with them with this one building, 20 growth, all that well. And then you get good income for the Gibbet and upgrade that to Gallows. So income and growth are not really issues for the Vampire Counts. They do also have the corruption problem, in that if they are in a region with no corruption whatsoever, no vampiric corruption, they will take casualties if it is a hostile region. So if I were to move them over here in Bitter Bay, I would be taking attrition on my units. But none of that matters. The Vampire Counts, the way they work is you can get blood kisses, and with these blood kisses you can awaken lords of certain bloodlines. One of the best ones I think is the von Karstein bloodline, because it gives you casualty replenishment control, though control is not necessarily too big of an issue with corruption, but it also gives you ranged units, Sylvanian crossbowmen, Sylvanian handgunners, all well and good. And then on top of that, they also have incredibly powerful recruitment options. So let's say I recruit a lord here in this region, and I go to Raise Dead. I fought the Skaven faction, the turn 1 Skaven faction. There was quite a lot of units killed here. I killed a lot of Skaven here, and because of the number of units that I killed, I believe, I can recruit top tier units from the very first few turns of the campaign. That is incredible. But beyond that, I can recruit, in pretty much any region I can recruit Raise Dead. Like even in regions where there wasn't as much blood loss. And so if, say for instance, if Kugaf were to attack me, or if he were to declare war on me, he'd likely march for the scrap towers, and I could just recruit a lord, get a bunch of units, beat the crap out of him. No problem. That is the power of the Vampire Counts currently. Is that flexibility of recruitment, it is that flexibility. Because these units, sure, they're expensive, but if we look at the prices here, let's look at the Skeletal Warriors. They're 300 there. For local recruitment, they're still 300. So that is the first thing to mention. You do have instant recruitment for the same price. So the vampire counts, very powerful faction. Why Helman Ghorst? And I want to be perfectly blunt about it. I do not like Helman Ghorst. I don't like his campaign style specifically, but I'd be lying out of my teeth if I said that any of the other vampire counts lords came anywhere close to his power. So what is his power? Is it his combat ability? No. Vlad and Manfred beat the shit out of him, so does Isabella. So all the other lords are far better in terms of lord combat potential than he is. However, his campaign potential is unparalleled, and I think maybe in the entire game or very close to it. Or it's certainly one of the strongest in the entire game. What is that campaign potential? Well, you have your regular research as the vampire counts, which buffs zombies, skeletal warriors, all that. So you get certain benefits like melee defense, working towards melee attack on zombies, and all that. Ghorst takes that a significant step further. So to begin with, as you start, you have more casualty replenishment, so you're able to recover any units you lose very, very quickly. And on top of that, your zombies and skeletal warriors have poison attacks. Poison will reduce the damage they're taking, so they'll survive much better in melee, they'll do a much better job. And they do have spells bound for corpse guards, lesser raised dead, which raises a unit of zombies. So every corpse guard you have can raise zombies, can get the unit of zombies. It won't last for the entire battle, and zombies don't necessarily have the best combat potential. Until they do, and that's where Helman Ghorst really ends up winning. So if we look at his skill tree, and this is really the winner, he personally, by default, will give 30 armor to zombies. 30 armor is an enormous amount, considering they start with 0. It's more armor than skeletal spearmen. It's not quite as much armor as some other units, but it is a hefty amount of armor for a really cheap crap unit that you can recruit in every region on turn 1, and raise dead on turn 1 in fairly large numbers. And he buffs that too, by the way. He will increase the number of zombies that are available. His whole thing is zombies. He's the zombie lord, and he is incredible when you think of the zombie lord. Now, I don't like this because 2 reasons. One, when you're fighting a battle of zombies, it's going to take forever to defeat the enemy army. You won't lose, but yeah, fighting 20-minute battles, even at very fast speed, does take a toll on you. Secondly, the auto resolve won't be very much favorable to you, but none of that matters. For all the downsides with that, the fact that you're going to have to fight a bunch of boring manual battles, you can't really be stopped very easily. And even when you are stopped, you can just easily recover with raised dead. But he goes even further than his default benefits and his faction benefits. Because his skill tree, his special skill tree, gives you this. 12 melee attack for zombies, all armies faction-wide. 10% ward save for zombies, faction-wide. 500% healing cap for zombie units, all armies faction-wide. So you have regeneration on zombies. The way you get it is certain units, like the Corpse Guard with Unholy Lodestone or the Mortis Engine, they will have mass regeneration. So all units around them will regenerate HP. Now, because of all the ward save, melee defense, melee attack, etc., your zombies, doesn't matter what kind of situation, unless mass range units or powerful magic, your zombies basically cannot be killed in a battle, especially in his army with that 30 armor. But even in other armies, with all the benefits, it means that the zombies cannot be killed. And it doesn't end there. Weapon strength, 50% for all zombies, faction-wide. And it just keeps going and going and going. So with all the research, the zombies are one of the best units you can get. But it's not just that. You aren't just limited to zombies. You could just say, screw it, fuck zombies. I can recruit everything else, right? You have Graveguard, you have Knights, you have Mortis Engines, etc. You have other options. You're not just limited to zombies. But here's where Ghorst really takes the top tier spot. Because if it was just the combat ability of his army, I would say screw it. I can get better armies with other vampire counts. I can get Graveguard, etc. No, that's not really why he wins. Because making a powerful army with 1 lord or 2 lords is something any faction can do. It doesn't matter which faction we're talking about. Making an unstoppable stack is something quite a few lords can do. But what Ghorst can do is make a dozen unstoppable armies for very, very little money. So look back at this lord that I just recruited, right? Let's say I wanted to make him unstoppable against the vast majority of enemy armies. Well, I just recruit 2 corpse guards. These are tier 3 units with unholy lodestones. Okay. And then do you know what I do? I go to zombies. 50 income for zombies. And you can fill this stack extremely quickly for raised dead and just recruit. So within a single turn, like after this turn ends, I have 15 units in this army. And you can do that. The more you grow, the more armies you can maintain. This is what the real power of Helman Ghorst is. It's not his combat ability. It's not the fact his armies can't be defeated in individual battles. Is that he can have 100 armies, none of which can be defeated easily. And even if they get defeated, they're just zombies. Who gives a shit? Just recruit more and send more and send more. And the AI can't beat the hell. I'm not sure if I was playing against Helman Ghorst in a co-op campaign how I would deal with that, because sure, I might win the individual battles, but he would just have the initiative. This is the problem. This is one of the biggest problems when playing on Legendary, especially when you have a large amount of territory, that everyone declares war against you, and the way the AI works is like they're playing Fabian tactics to the extreme, where they're not going to attack any of your armies that might defeat them. No. They're going to do everything in their power to avoid that. This is what gives Taurox such a benefit, because Taurox doesn't really, or the Beastmen in general, they only have a handful of settlements that are really well defended, so the AI can't do shit against them. But the vast majority of factions, they are vulnerable to those kind of raiding tactics, and they're exceptionally frustrating to deal with because you're running around like a headless chicken trying to tackle that. But Ghorst? In a single turn, Ghorst recruits 10 units, 11 units. Hell, in general, as the vampire counts, you can do this. But what makes it so strong for him is the fact he can do it far more than any other faction in the game. I'm not just talking vampire counts. Warriors cast doesn't fucking matter. No other faction comes close to having as much armies as this bastard can have. As terrible as the playstyle is, because I don't like playing with mass zombies, I admit. As terrible as the playstyle can be, it cannot be denied. This is incredibly potent. It means you can send armies. Like this army right here, the one I'm recruiting. I've already declared war on Greece. I've taken one of his settlements. I'm just going to send another stack to support them. Win the odds resolved. Send 2 stacks against enemy. Oh, he's too strong for 2 stacks. Send 3 more. No problem. And you can afford it. Hell, sack a settlement, a high-level settlement. You'll afford 10 armies, 20 armies, 100 armies. Nothing and no one can stop you. You will swarm the world with zombies, and there is nothing anyone can do about it in any way, shape, or form. Because even if you lose one army or another, none of those armies have any value whatsoever except the lords. And once you get immortal on those lords, you don't even care about that. Once you get immortality, the only real issue is the corpse guard. Like sure, a smart player, if they were playing against the vampire counts trying to use this, would snipe the corpse guard, and that would eliminate the healing. But yeah, these zombies can't be killed, they regenerate HP, and they're incredibly cheap. This army right here is 740 upkeep. Ghorst's army is 2,000. This army, filled with zombies at just one single corpse guard, is 600. 600 is insane. The degree that this can get out of control with with some of the worst units imaginable in the game, but with all the buffs that they have, and especially the regeneration, even if they didn't have the ward save, the weapon strength, the melee attack, the melee defense, all those other things, just the fact that they can regenerate and can't be easily killed with corpse guards, and the fact that corpse guards, every single corpse guard can spawn another unit of zombies. Like, you don't even have to play with zombies as Ghorst. You can just screw it, go with the corpse guard meta, just spawn an endless tide of zombies in a battle. There's no way you can lose here. There's no way the AI can, oh, I left my defenses open. Well, you leave your defenses open, build them back up instantly. No problem. No issue. Now, these kind of tactics are available, of course, to other Vampire Count lords, but Ghorst just makes it that much better because of all the buffs he gives those zombies. Like, if Manfred tries to do it, yeah, he can recruit an army pretty quickly, and it would be pretty decent, but he doesn't recruit an army with tier 1 units that can't be killed by most factions. And also, finally, there is his starting position, because this is really what elevates Ghorst as well. Like, Vlad, like, let's look at the other Vampire Counts faction. Vlad starts in Sylvania. He is surrounded by dwarves, Drycha, the Empire. He's gonna have a lot of foes. Can he beat them? Oh yeah, the Empire's got a lot of shit. The dwarves aren't too strong, and they have other problems as well. Well, the dwarves aren't too strong necessarily, though their high armor will make them a bit of an issue, but you can tackle that. That's not necessarily the problem. But Vlad will have a lot of enemies. He might have a gold mine, he might have 2 regions easily for taking for himself, but he is going to have a lot of enemies. He can deal with them, but he's going to have a fight on his hands. Manfred? Manfred is, well, he's in the middle of the Thunderdome. Smack dab in the middle, right between everyone else. Again, he's got a lot of power because of his faction. He can actually gain a significant amount of power because of the Books of Nagash if he gets that. So every Vampire Count faction is pretty strong right now, but none can quite reach the level of ridiculousness that Ghorst provides. And that's why he's number 3. And if he's number 3, you might wonder who's number 2 and who's number 1. Well, I'm pretty sure you know who's number 1. But who's number 2, you might ask? And number 2 is the greatest chef that ever lived, Grom the Paunch. Is turn 57. This is a campaign, I streamed part of it. Other parts I've done myself because, well, there was a lot of auto-resolve and traipsing around. Not necessarily something to show on the stream. But Grom the Paunch. The Greenskins are a fairly strong faction to begin with. Their basic units, their goblins and orc boys and orc archer boys and all that, fairly strong in a fight. They also have the Wa ability, which gives them more combat potential. And then they have the campaign Wa, which is even worse. When you use a campaign Wa, each army that you have on the field of battle will spawn units. It will spawn up to 20 more units tied to that army. So each army is not just one stack, it's really 2 stacks of units combined in one. That in itself is incredibly powerful. And the overall Greenskin plan, the overall Greenskin faction is fairly simple. You have your heaps of shiny stuff. You have good public order through the boss's tent. You have a fairly simple plan to rely on those buildings for public order, for control, and also sacking settlements to gain a lot of income. Like if I sack Tor of Res here, I'll gain probably over 10k income, 10k gold over here, no problem. So that's just the baseline of the orc faction. That in itself is really strong. They have good spells, good armies, plentiful armies, not quite on their level of ridiculousness of Helman Ghorst, but still plenty of armies. And then there is Grom, who's like, I'm gonna take it to a new level. I'm gonna cook. And he's gonna cook using various parts of various creatures and beings in the universe. And he's gonna get faction-wide benefits that crank the Greenskins up to 11. Greenskins already don't really have a control issue. No problem. Let's get 8 more control on that. Or 10% more income on my buildings. Oh, your archers, which are already strong enough, surprisingly strong enough, let's buff them up by 10%. Let's reduce enemy leadership. And those are my choices. There are other choices as well. By default, as Grom, you're going to have extra growth and ocean clams. Ocean clams give you casualty replenishment. You have incredibly powerful casualty replenishment as Grom the Paunch, especially with the troll, the giant river troll hag, which buffs it up. So you can replenish troops very easily as Grom the Paunch. And it gets even better when you start adding in the various ingredients. So you get casualty replenishment and literally get paid for things. Yes, get paid. So for instance, I add these two. Let me just add these two. Let me just give you an idea. So right now I have pretty much no gold whatsoever. I add these two. You get scrap by fighting battles, killing enemies, all that. That's gained for battles. Okay, so I add these two. I get 2,000 gold. You can't run out of gold in this campaign. You get gold for fighting battles, you get gold for sacking, looting settlements, you get gold for field battles, you get gold from scrap by using the scrap you gained from battles. You have a vast amount of resources. You have already powerful armies. You have Wa. Grom also, insanely enough, as I feel, starts with an item on his hag. A jar that can summon a rogue idol. Now, sadly enough, it can't destroy walls. In this case, that one can't destroy walls. But it is an insane combat potential. So you have a top tier unit. It is a summon, so it will decay pretty quickly. But he has a top tier unit from the very start. He has a powerful economy and the ability to take a lot of settlements, sack them, raise them to the ground, and then rebuild them very quickly. And he's doing this in unpleasant climate, so he has to pay more, and the income isn't as great. Construction time is higher for settlement buildings, all that, but none of that fucking matters. Grom is just an unstoppable force in both the battlefield and on the campaign map. He's so powerful that that if you play him, you'll get rank 1 with incredible ease. Now I'm rank 3. I've suffered some setbacks because, well, the problem is everyone hates you. Like, this is the issue. This is the one fundamental problem, and one I didn't necessarily appreciate from the very start. But the one issue Grom has, everyone hates him. Why do they hate him? Well, because everyone has, well, or a lot of the factions have minus 100 diplomatic relations with him from the very start. 100 to aversion from the Dwarves, Wood Elves, Empire, Bretonnia, and you start smack dab in the middle of Bretonnia. People despise him so much that they will fight a war to the death. Even when you've reduced them to their last settlement, they will fight a war of annihilation against you. I mean, it doesn't matter though. That's the thing. It doesn't matter if you play your cards right. None of that fucking matters. You know what I did with Grom the Paunch? I started here. Bretonnia no longer exists. Yeah. Reichland no longer exists. Yeah, I did that. The Oak of Ages, I turned that to Kindling, though it has been resettled since then by Durfo, who is actually a bit of a nemesis. The one problem you're going to have in this campaign is the fact that you are so universally despised by so many people that virtually everyone that surrounds you or you meet will declare war on me. Like both Morgor and Khazrak have declared war on me. The Skaven are in the process of declaring war on me. All of the Wood Elves declared war on me. All of the Bretonnian factions declared war on me. Reichland declared war on me. The dwarves that start here, Kemler, all of them declared war on me. I beat the crap out of them in every single major battle that I fought. The problem is the Fabian tactics that AI uses raise my settlements. If you want a bit of advice, here's what I'd say. Build a garrison building in every single minor settlement. That will certainly deter the enemy. Like, just go for extra garrisons, get walls, make every minor settlement a fortress so you won't lose them. For me, that's a bit too late, and so I've decided, you know what, my armies are beatable one-on-one. I have 2 armies. I had 3 armies, 3 full stacks of decent units before this, and I disbanded one of them. I just couldn't maintain them at battlefield, and I'm invading Wolf 1. And understand this. I started in Bretonnia, at war basically with all of Bretonnia, at war with all of the Wood Elves, at war with Reichland. I beat the crap out of them. They're still around. I just don't have the economy to support the armies right now to defeat them. And my plan right now in the campaign, which I believe will actually work, is to invade Ulf1. Ulf1, which has 3 legendary lords that are some of the most powerful in the entire game. And I'm like, they're dinner for Grom. That's what Tyrion, Eltharion, and Eltharion are gonna end up being. Like, I've already gotten a sneak attack here. Although, to be honest, Eltharion looked at these 2 stacks and I'm like, I'm out. I'll be able to declare a Wa soon. I'll declare it on Lothern and wipe out Tyrion with it. The one thing you need to know is you don't want to get bogged down trying to fight the very small armies. Like, if they take your settlements, okay, accept that reality. Don't develop them. Don't waste your time as I did. That's the mistake I did over here. And just go from battle to battle. Wipe out everyone, raise everything to the ground if need be. Just don't allow yourself to be stopped. You are such a monumental threat that everyone will unite against you, and even then they won't be able to stop you unless they're using cheap tactics, because they can't defeat you one-on-one. The closest who came to defeating me one-on-one, and I attacked him, was Durfu because of the power of the Wood Elves, but not anymore, not with the trolls that I just recruited, not with the Ragnarok and the Rogue Idol. Grom is incredible. You know who I'm reminded of Grom? When I think about it, and I'm reminded of this from Warcraft, I'm reminded of Garrosh Hellscream. Bit of an interesting point, by the way. The reason they no longer use Grom Hellscream as a name is, I guess, because of Grom the Paunch, or copyright from Warhammer. It had something to do with Games Workshop. But beyond the point, Garrosh Hellscream in a trailer for the Siege of Orgrimmar raid in World of Warcraft is told, everyone is going to come and kill you. And he's like, yes, that's what I want. That is exactly what is going to happen to you when you're playing Grom the Paunch. Everyone is going to try and kill you, and you're going to fucking love it. Because every field battle, every settlement that you fight for, you gain an enormous amount of gold. You get looter, you get income from looting settlements. Then you get Ravager, though I honestly should have gotten upgraded this. You get insane amounts of income. Tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of gold. It doesn't matter that your entire land under your control might be razed to the ground numerous times over, as it has happened to me here in the southern Bretonia. It doesn't matter that the Order Tide, forget that, it's not even the Order Tide, because we're counting Skaven and Beastmen. It doesn't matter that the entire goddamn of existence is gonna march its armies against you. You are gonna wipe them out. With ease, not even with difficulty, with ease. The only issue is actually chasing down the enemy armies and stopping them before they get out of hand. That's the only issue, because they're just gonna run amok through your undefended territory, pick the fights they can win. But in a straight up fight between a Greenskin stack, a single Greenskin stack, and with especially one with a WAP behind it, they stand no chance. That is the situation. If other factions are a problem, Grom is a biblical threat for everyone involved. If virtually everyone hadn't teamed up against me, I'd probably control half the world by now. Maybe I'm exaggerating, but I would have gone from settlement to settlement, battle from battle, and they wouldn't have been able to stop me. And you can still do it. Just accept the fact you're gonna get raided and constantly attacked. Don't defend settlements that can't be attacked. Move from battle to battle to battle, because you gain a lot of gold. And eventually, just raise more armies and beat the crap out of the raiders. Eventually resettle settlements, make every settlement a fortress. That should be your game plan. You take that as a game plan, you are unstoppable, unbeatable, and you will paint the world blue. Or green, whatever you prefer. And finally, at number 1, Archaon, the Everchosen. The Warriors of Chaos are an incredible faction at the moment, with the changes of the Champions of Chaos DLC, with the rework that they've gone through. So they've gone from a horde faction to a faction that only holds a certain number of settlements and then vassalizes and allies everyone else. And it is quite something. Just to understand, I start here in the Blood Marshes. This is turn 56. I control the vast majority of the Empire, all of Norska, and I'm stepping into the Chaos Wastes. Every faction in blue is either an ally, or the vast majority of them are a vassal. I've got so many vassals that I think I'm getting close to breaking the game, to be honest. I'm probably reaching the cap in terms of vassal tribute that I can gain per turn, though I think that's for individual factions. But what makes the Warriors of Chaos so strong, before we get into what makes Archaon so strong? Well, instant global recruitment. It does depend on province, but you do get access to warband recruitment, so you can get certain units. Warriors of Chaos, Chaos Warriors, Forsaken, Marauders, Marauder Horsemen, all that. This kind of variety is actually great. It's one of the things that makes the Vampire Con so good, that they do have this kind of recruitment. For you, this is the baseline, though I would argue it's probably not as good as the Vampire Cons, because they also have regular recruitment on top of it, and you have limits to it. But it doesn't matter. Then you have gifted units, special units limited to 6 per army, so like artillery, demons, etc. incredibly potent, incredibly powerful in its own right. You can get gifted units through the gifts of chaos, certain gifts, and so on. Then you have your regiments of renown. And your regular units here, your marauders, your chaos warriors, they can get upgraded. If I look at an army here, an army I sent to put a certain dragon ogre in line, Kolek. And it was actually easy because he only had this one Dark Fortress. If I look at these chaos warriors, go to warband upgrades, you can start from marauders, go to chaos warriors with different weapons, and you can swap between different weapons. So I want to swap them to regular sword and board, so to speak, or great weapons. I can do that instantly for a cost, of course, but it's a fairly minor cost, really, all things considered, like 130, insignificant. So very easy. You rank them up, you get them better. The better they get, the more ranks you acquire. Right, so there's a good amount of things to talk about with the Warriors Chaos, but that kind of a recruitment system makes them really powerful because they can do it in every region. Though there are going to be hard limits. So for instance, here in the Empire, I can only get some Marauders, some Aspiring Champions, some Wolves, and yeah, just some Wolves in general. But this is literally a region that I've taken recently. You can't sell smaller or non-Dark Fortress sites because all you'll get is one slot. Your main settlements are going to be the Dark Fortress. So you have the same kind of benefit in terms of recruitment as the Vampire Counts, which is incredibly potent. You have, and you have the same benefit that Taurox and Beastmen have in that your settlements are really just going to be single settlements that are heavily fortified. Yours are even more heavily fortified. They can have a lot of units, maybe not as much as the Beastmen, sure, but they can have a lot of units, especially if you get the garrison building for some units there. They provide a really good amount of income through the loot heap, as well as other buildings that do upgrade that income. So 40% income from all buildings. I already have it at 30% through the Cash Shrine, which is a tier 2 building. So really powerful income, really difficult to take. The AI generally will avoid that. So that's a benefit that you share with the Beastmen. You share a similar recruitment benefit with the Vampire Counts. You have a pretty solid, powerful army in all respects except ranged. And you can get some ranged units, just not that many. But you can get some ranged units, especially if you're playing Village, the Siege guy. You do have access to Gifts of Siege, that will give you some Pink Horrors, or if you're playing Belagor, Exalted Pink Horrors, though they're not really the strongest. You're mainly a melee faction, though you do have some of the best artillery in the game with the Hell Cannons. So the Warriors of Chaos are incredibly potent. They're an unstoppable horde. They give their baseline as a faction is to get Dark Fortresses and then vassalize other regions. So for instance here, you will start with one vassal. I got within the first 20 turns 8. Most of them demonic. Some Norscan, some demonic. Demonic factions as vassals, quite a bit of power. I got Skaven as vassals. The Clan Ferric over here, they bent the knee. Other factions have bent the knee. Kislev is gone, the Empire is largely gone. Norscar is either allied or will be vassalized or has been vassalized. So, you have the potential of becoming a steamroller from very early on. Other factions have that, sure. Here's the real kicker for the Warriors of Chaos. Because you're such a vassal-centric faction, with some exception, like Festus, Festus will not really have that many vassals because he doesn't start with any next to him. Though he could just hop onto Norsca, conquer it, and then just go back to the Empire to finish them off, or send a stack there while his main army conquers the Empire. Choices. Festus, by the way, even when played by the AI, will conquer vast portions of the Empire. Okay. Because you have so many vassals, they will do a lot of the fighting for you. Like, any faction I were to declare war against wouldn't just be fighting me. In fact, I could just sit back, watch TV, do absolutely nothing, just click the enter button, and I'd win. Because my dozen or so vassals, or a bit more than that, I think at this point getting close to 2 dozen, would just send stack upon stack upon stack of troops against them. Like the Magath can for instance, or the Orcs that I have as vassals. Never mind that your own armies are fairly strong on their own. Never mind that specific aspect of it. So you have you have a strong army, you have a strong economy, you have good recruitment, you have power behind your hands, and you can literally let the AI, your AI vassals, do all the fighting for you. That is incredibly potent in itself. What makes Archaon the top dog of the Warriors of Chaos? Because there are some good Warriors of Chaos lords outside of him. Kolic is incredibly strong on individual level because he gains weapon strength for each vassal. Valkia is very quick. She shares a similar movement benefit to someone like Taurox or Scarbrand, really, because she copied Scarbrand's mechanics. What makes Archaon so powerful? Well, it's his faction benefits. So he gains... He does gain various... His skill tree is not anything special to write home about, though he does gain certain benefits to Exalted Heroes, Authority, etc. But his faction benefit, if we look over here, his faction benefit is this. You gain 10% research for each vassal. For me, it's probably around 200% at this point, or very close to it. You get 25 souls. Souls are your special currency for each vassal per turn. I'm gaining 400, so not quite 20, but close enough. So 400 per each vassal. And I just finished vassalizing Be'lakor, and vassalizing Be'lakor over here meant also vassalizing, because if you are attacking someone who has a vassal, you'll gain their vassals as your vassal. So I've gotten Wulfric as my vassal right now. Right? So for each vassal, you gain a significant benefit to research, to the point that I can do any research within 2 turns, I think, right now. I think there is some cap, but yeah, I'm in an incredibly good position from research. And very crucially, you get diplomatic relations plus 10 for every vassal, which means that for every Chaos factions, Chaos Alliance factions, so Demons, Norska, or Warriors of Chaos. So the Demon Prince, for instance, has been very friendly towards me for pretty much since the beginning of this campaign. There was supposed to be a rivalry. It's like, Archaon is just the beloved. He should just be named the beloved. I get 180, because that's how many vassals I have. Oh, there's the number. 18 vassals. 18 vassals! Let alone military and defensive allies. I have free defensive allies, free military allies. It is insane. The power creep is strong. The starting position is strong. The Lord is strong in combat potential. The recruitment system, the economy. The only weakness, if you will, of the Warriors of Chaos is range units, which doesn't even matter all that much because range units are not particularly good right now for fighting a lot of the settlement battles, and those settlement battles are going to constitute the vast majority of the battles you are going to be fighting right now. Strong artillery, strong melee, strong single entities, strong heroes, strong lords. That is the Warriors of Chaos in a nutshell, and Archaon is just top dog. No other Warriors of Chaos faction can get so completely out of control as he can. They're all strong, every single one of them. Even Sigvald right here, who has a corruption issue because he relies on Slaanesh corruption but generates undivided corruption with his main settlement buildings. Even Sigvald is an unstoppable machine. But Archaon is something else, something completely different. Grom the Paunch is powerful, but Grom the Paunch fights the world. Archaon, he fights the world, but the world loves him as well for it. He goes around conquering vassal after vassal after vassal, or forcing them to bend the knee. I've literally threatened some of these factions to bend the knee or get annihilated, and for the most part, with the exception of some major factions like Sigvald, they've largely bent the knee. Only Sigvald has refused to be threatened so far, but he's gonna have a very short lifespan at this point. Or I just take his fortress, because I think if I toggle the Fog of War, if I toggle that, I think he only has 1 settlement. So I just go there, march Archaon across the sea, take a settlement, subjugate them, and there, Sigvald becomes my vassal. Or rather, he has 2 settlements, so I'll probably take one for myself and subjugate him in the other one. Archaon is just incredibly powerful. The Warriors of Chaos are incredibly powerful. Do they deserve a nerf? Do any of these factions deserve a nerf? Well, not necessarily from my perspective. I think the problem, if you will, is less to do about how powerful one lord or another is, and more to do about one, the design of the game for the vast majority of factions and how they've been left behind compared to others when they've been reworked. And two, I think it has to do with the fact that AI is okay early on as a challenge, but could use some benefits, income benefits, all that later on. Also, the AI makes some extremely questionable decisions. While the whole Fabian tactic war route that they choose is really frustrating, it's not really a threat in the sense, and it doesn't make them a threat. The fact that the AI doesn't have a game plan to take major settlements, large regions of territory, unless they have overwhelming force, which they won't. The fact that they won't do that means that they won't expand to vast map-spanning empires as we've seen before. Although, to be fair, there are some fairly solid factions right here. Though they don't control, they haven't painted the map. No, I haven't seen any faction really paint the map completely on their own. There are some that do gain a good amount of territory, absolutely. Morathi, for instance, as an example, the factions of Ulthuan, they'll do pretty well. Yeah, they just won't get completely out of control, which makes them weak towards the mid and late game. That is the issue. But anyway, that's all I had to say. Costin signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, enable notifications, and I'll see you next time. If you do enjoy the content, consider donating via PayPal or Patreon, and join the Discord. Link in the description of this video.